Welcome back to Spring Into Math 5. This is Mr. Stein here again. Today we're going to wrap up Chapter 8 with a content review. Okay, so we're reviewing Chapter 8's concepts. And as always, we're going to kind of go through each of the main ideas, and we're going to go through them a little bit quickly, kind of rehashing what we talked about. So if there's anything that you need a little bit further instruction on, go back, check it out, do some of the sample problems so you can really understand those concepts. Okay, so the first thing we touched on was customary units of measurement. So the customary system of measurement is the system of measurement most widely used in the United States. This system includes measurements of length, mass, volume, and units of volume that are used mostly for cooking. All right, so let's take a look at a chart. So we have our customary units of length, which are your inch, your foot, yard, and mile. Then we have our customary units of mass, which are ounce and pounds. Then we have our volume, which is ounce, cups, pints, quarts, and gallons. And then we have our customary units of volume that are used in cooking, which are your teaspoon, your tablespoon, and your cup. Okay, now, unlike the metric system, there's not a specific way of relating the customary units of measurement to each other. And I know it's kind of unfortunate with the metric system, it makes it kind of easy, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But for this, you would think that, if a foot is 12 inches, then you might think the next largest measurement, which is a yard, might be 12 feet. But of course, it's not, that there's 3 feet in 1 yard. All right, so nevertheless, there are relationships among the units of measurement. For now, it's helpful to refer to the chart when working with customary units of measurement. As you get more and more familiar with them, with the various different measurement tools and the units of measurement, you're going to acquire an automatic sense of measurement and how they relate. And so let's take a look at some examples that deal with equivalence or equal measurement. Okay, so here we have 6 feet is equal to how many yards? So we're going to convert feet into yards. So there are 3 feet in 1 yard. So if we divide 6 feet by 3 feet, then we'll get the correct number of yards. So since there is 3 feet in 1 yard, we divide 6 divided by 3 and we get 2, so 6 feet is equal to 2 yards. And like I said, many of you are already accustomed to that. You're already thinking, well, 2 times 3 is 6, so the answer is going to be 2. Now, let's look at something that's a little less commonly used unless you're big into cooking. So we have 2 tablespoons is equal to how many teaspoons? So we're going to convert tablespoons to teaspoons. To do this, we're going to multiply. So there are 3 teaspoons in 1 tablespoon. So since I have 2 tablespoons, I'm going to multiply by 3, and that'll give me 6. So 2 tablespoons is equal to 6 teaspoons. All right, now, here's the main thing. If you take nothing else away but these 2 statements, you're going to be better for it. If you go from a larger unit to a smaller unit, you multiply. And then if you go from a smaller unit to a larger unit, you're going to divide. And we've talked about that a bunch throughout this chapter. But remember, large to small is multiply, small to large is divide. All right, now let's talk about the metric system. In science classes and anywhere outside the United States for that matter, length is measured with the metric system. The most common units that we use to measure length in the metric system are the millimeter, centimeter, meter, and kilometer. Now, the millimeter is the smallest commonly used unit in the measurement system, or in the metric measurement system. So the abbreviation for millimeters is mm. So if you had 3 millimeters, you'd have 3 mm. A millimeter would be used to measure something that's very small, like a seed or something of that size. Okay, so the centimeter is the next smallest unit of measurement that we use commonly. And the abbreviation for centimeters is cm. So 1 centimeter is roughly the width of a staple. So there are 10 millimeters in 1 centimeter. So centimeters are smaller, and just to kind of give you an idea, centimeters are actually smaller than inches. Okay, the next common metric unit is the meter. So the abbreviation for meter is just simply m, and a meter is longer than a foot. In fact, a meter is roughly about the same size as a yard. It's actually a little bit bigger. So one way to get an idea of the length of a meter is to stretch out your arms from your sides and then go from fingertip to fingertip, and that's going to give you roughly about a meter. So there are 100 centimeters in 1 meter. And as we're going to talk about in a few moments, a meter is really that base unit. So the meter is the base unit of 1, and then you're either going to have something bigger or smaller. Now, meters are used to measure bigger objects or longer distances, such as the depth of a pool or the distance of a hallway, things like that. All right, now we have kilometers. And these are the longest unit of metric measurement. Sorry, it was a mouthful. The abbreviation for kilometers is km. So like miles, kilometers are used to measure long distances, such as the distance from your house to the store or from one city to another, things like that. So large distances. Kilometers are a little more than half a mile. So to give you perspective, they're the longest unit in the metric system, but it's not as long as a mile. And they are much longer than meters. There are 1,000 meters in just 1 kilometer. Okay, so let's talk about some measurement tools to kind of wrap up the idea of customary and metric measurement. Whether you're measuring the length of items using the customary system of measurement or the metric system, you still have to decide which measurement tool is going to be the best to use for your given situation. So these are the most commonly used tools for measurement. We have rulers, tape measures, yardsticks, and meter sticks. All right, now, rulers. Now these are used all the time in math. Rulers are used to measure small things. Most rulers show both customary units of measurement like inches and metric units of measurement such as millimeters and centimeters. All right, so you can measure a small item in customary units or metric units. So you can see here I have the same hair clip, and on the top picture I'm measuring it in inches, and in the bottom I'm measuring it in centimeters, so I'm doing one in customary and one in metric. Another tool to measure length is the tape measure. So they're used to measure many of the distances that are too long for a ruler to measure easily. And another thing about a tape measure is it's flexible, because think about it, it's small and it goes really far, so it's obviously rolled up in that little device, and so it's something that you can manipulate a little bit. Tape measures most commonly show length in inches and feet, but sometimes a tape measure will have both customary and metric units marked. So we use tape measures all the time to measure things. Now, a yardstick measures things by the yard and only shows customary units, inches and feet. So since there are 3 feet in a yardstick can be used for things that are longer than a piece of paper, let's say, but that are not too long where a tape measure would be a better measurement tool for that situation. So some of the things that you could measure with a tape measure could also be measured with a yardstick, but it really depends if a rigid measure like a yardstick is appropriate versus the flexible tape measure. So you just have to decide on your situation. A meter stick measures 1 meter and shows only the metric units of millimeters and centimeters. So meter sticks are used to measure objects that are larger than a piece of paper. So remember, you can use centimeters and millimeters if the object is smaller than a piece of paper, and those items are pretty much easily measured with a ruler. A meter stick is a little over 3 feet long, like I talked about before, because a meter stick is approximately 3 2/10 feet or 3.2 feet. A meter stick closely compares to a yardstick, so they're almost interchangeable, but obviously a meter stick is just a little bit longer. All right, now let's talk about some conversions. All right, so let's look at capacity. So we have our units, and then we have our equivalent units that go with it. So we have 2 cups is equivalent to 1 pint. We have 2 pints is equivalent to 1 quart, and we have 4 quarts is equivalent to 1 gallon. And hopefully you still have this in your notes from a couple lessons ago. This is obviously something that comes back and is real handy to have recorded. Okay, now let's talk length. So we have our units and then obviously our equivalent unit. So we have 12 inches is equivalent to 1 foot. We have 3 feet is equivalent to 1 yard. We have 1,760 yards, which is equivalent to 1 mile. And then on the metric side, we have 100 centimeters is equivalent to 1 meter. 1,000 meters is equivalent to 1 kilometer, and 2.2 centimeters is equivalent to 1 inch, just to give you some comparison. Now, I know that's a lot of information. Again, make sure you have that written down. It's really helpful when doing practice problems to have those units, those conversions or equivalents rather, ready to go. All right, let's talk weight. So now we have our units and our equivalent unit. So we have 16 ounces is equivalent to 1 pound, and then we have 2,000 pounds is equivalent to 1 ton. And when I'm saying equivalent, really I'm saying 2,000 pounds is equal to 1 ton. It's really the same thing because equivalent means equal. All right, let's look at some metric conversions now. So let's start out with this chart to help us with metric conversions. We talked about this one before. This is the King Henry died unusually drinking chocolate milk. Okay, I know it's kind of a mouthful. But remember, when you looked at this chart before, the thing to take away is that each letter represents a prefix, which represents how much, the prefix gives you a meaning, and it really helps you out. So you had King stands for kilo, which was, gives you the prefix of 1,000. Henry stands for hecto, which means 100. Died stands for deca, which gives you a unit of 10. Then we have unusually, which is our base unit, which is your grams and meters and liters, things like that. Then you have drinking, which stands for deci, which is it's a tenth. Remember now, this is on the other side of the decimal point. This is a tenth. Then we have chocolate, which stands for centa, which is 100th. And then we have milk, which is milla, which is 1,000th. Okay? All right, now, let's take a look at this next chart. I think this one's a little bit easier. I showed you this one before. Just going to kind of rehash those prefixes. So we have kilo is 1,000. Hecto is 100, Deca is 10. We have our base unit, which is our meter, gram, and liter. We have deci, which is tenths. We have centa, which is hundredths. And then we have milla, which is thousandths. So remember the lesson where we moved the decimal. Remember we talked about the decimal before where we moved that decimal over? Remember, with that, the idea of those prefixes is to save you time. So if you're converting something, you just kind of move those decimals over. All right, so I know that's a lot of information. Remember, if anything kind of sounds confusing, go back. I know there's examples in our first set of lessons for each of these things. I know you guys are going to do great on your reviews and on your test. See you next time.